Welcome to this another of my podcasts and blog post, themysticp.com. It's another perspective with I, the mystic philosopher. And yes, my melanin people, my African people, it's high time to use our minds. It's high time for reasoning. The title of this podcast and blog post is U.S. President Donald J. Trump right in calling or referring to African countries and other countries that he and others of his peers perceived as being poor, shithole countries? It is part of my presentation series called Redemption from the Curse of the Black Spell. And it will be followed by another podcast, blog post titled The Natives' Dreadful Fear of the Black Caucasians, which is also part of the Redemption from the Curse of the Black Spell series. And some of you may have noticed and have already figured out for yourselves from the name another perspective with the mystic philosopher. It's high time to use our minds. It's high time for reasoning. My purpose and objectives are to share via this media some of my perspectives on subjects, words, topics, and issues, etc., that are either of personal interest or those that might be impacting other people's lives as well. It is also to provoke thoughts and reasoning, first among my own highly enriched melanin, highly enriched carbon people, we the Earth's organic humans of African ancestry, and others that might respectfully like to join in the discussions. My perspective, meaning the way that I, the mystic philosopher, personally see, experience, interpret, and by utilizing my intelligence and activated common sense, think that I know and understand them. My purpose and objectives in this podcast or blog post titled Is the U.S. President Donald J. Trump right in calling or referring to African countries and other countries that he and others of his peers perceived as being poor, shitholes countries, is simply to add another critical and analytical perspective to the discussion. If this is the first time that you are listening any of my podcast, or watching any of my videos, or reading any of my blog posts, I ask that you also listen, watch, or read some, if possible, all of my other uploaded videos and podcasts and blog posts. And I'm sure you will hear another perspective and possible find something different to either think about, talk about, reason about, or simply something to comment on. Now, according to the news media reports, it is alleged that the U.S. President Donald J. Trump has made some very disparaging remarks while meeting with his lawmakers by saying and referring to Africans and other countries as shithole countries. He is alleged to have asked the question, quote, "Why are we having all these people from shithole countries come here?" unquote. It is also alleged that he demanded and wanted to know why the United States would accept immigrants from these countries rather than from places like Norway, which incidentally, whose prime minister he had met with the day before. And among the countries named or referred to as shithole countries are El Salvador, Haiti, or Haiti, and certain other African nations. Now, almost everyone is upset about it. Leaders the world over are condemning him for saying it. And most people are claiming to be offended by it. And his fellow US politicians and political opponents are milking it dry for what it's worth and for their own personal and political gains, their own personal and political benefits. But nobody, it seems, is taking time out to dissect his alleged disparaging statement, his alleged disparaging comment. And I say alleged because, number one, the president, a politician, I must remind you, is denying it or has denied making such a statement or denied saying it. Number two, from my current knowledge and understanding, there were only his colleagues, his fellow politicians and lawmakers that were in the room with him, and some of whom it's alleged, some of whom is alleged to have heard him say it, and then one from among them leaked it to the media, who then ran with it and published it. Number three, I was not there or anywhere close by. And as my mother used to say, son, believe only half of what you see and none of what you hear. Which I rightfully interpret to mean that things are not always what they appear to be. Even though I must or I might be seeing, even though I might be seeing them or might think that I'm seeing them. And by not believing none of what I hear, I also rightfully interpret that to mean that I should seek to know the truth and what is real for myself and not just simply accept hearsay at face value, regardless of who I might hear say it or who that is saying it. So again, the question is the US President Donald J. Trump right in calling or referring to African countries and other countries that he and others of his peers perceive as being poor, shithole countries? I want to remind you or inform you that President Donald J. Trump is not a fool. So please be not deceived by the gimmicks. I want to remind you and inform you that regardless of what the news media are saying about him and regardless of how they are portraying him, he is not an idiot. So please be not deceived by the gimmicks. I want to remind you or inform you of the fact that he, President Donald J. Trump, knows exactly what he's saying and exactly what he's doing. So please be not be deceived by the gimmicks. I also want to remind or inform you that the powers that is, but should not be, knows exactly what they are doing. So again, please be not deceived by the gimmicks. If any of you, my listeners, think or believe that President Donald J. Trump, is an idiot, as he might sometimes appears to be presenting himself, presenting himself to be, or as the media and others are portraying him to be an idiot, then just ask yourself these few questions and allow your own basic but activated common sense to think on them and then to answer them for you. Question 1 is this: if the United States of America is really and truly a corporation, a business corporation, and the world's biggest and most powerful imperialist business corporation, do you honestly think that the real founders, owners, shareholders, the real board of directors and its real corporation governors, corporate governance, etc., of such a mega, huge and powerful imperialist corporation, do you think that they would select an idiot to be its imperialist president and CEO, or their imperialist president and CEO? Again, please be not deceived by the gimmicks. Do you know of, or can you name one business corporation that is the lowest common or ordinary employees that choose who is or who will be its president and CEO? Can you name me one? One business corporation that allow the low ordinary employees to select the president and CEO. Do you also honestly think or believe that the real founders, shareholders, the real board of directors, and its real corporation governors, corporate governance, etc., of such a mega, huge and powerful imperialist corporation called the United States of America would allow or would depend upon the wisdom and judgment of their common employees and slaves, also known as their common citizens, subjects and civilians of that imperialist corporation, also known as the United States of America? Do you think that they would be the ones that these people, the common citizens and employees and civilians, would be the ones that choose its president and CEO? From my perspective, if your answer is yes, then you are either not wise or you are being deceived or delusional. And above all, I want to again remind you or inform you that President Donald J. Trump, knows exactly what he's doing, and also that he is a politician. Please be not deceived by the gimmicks. And a politician is, or what is a politician? Some of you might be asking. Well, first, before I tell you or remind you of who and what a politician is, let me begin by telling or reminding you of the fact that the word politician is derived from the word politics. And what is politics? Or better yet, what is the meaning and definition of the word politics, you might also ask? Well, politics is the art and science of government. And what is government? govern is mind controlled, or government is mind controlled, or controlled of the mind. Now please let me break it down further for those of you that are the naysayers, or skeptics, cynics, and critics, etc. Therefore, politics by definition and for all practical sense and purposes is the art and science of mind control. Government means, as I said before, mind control. Governed and means control, and mind and meant means mind. Therefore, politics by definition and for all practical sense and purposes is the art and science of mind control. So now let me just quote at least 3 English dictionaries definitions of the word politician. And I humbly ask that you please bear in mind that I am not a lexicographer. And these are not my words, neither is it my language. Dictionary number 1, a quick Google search, and all these things that I will be quoting can be easily found on just on the internet. Just Google it. Dictionary number 1, or Google search dictionary number 1. Politician by definition, and I quote, 1, a person who is professionally involved in politics, especially as a holder of or a candidate for an elected office, unquote. That's one definition from search dictionary number 1, Google search dictionary number 1. So if my decoding of the word politics and the word government is correct, then this definition number 1 here is hereby telling us that a politician is a person who is professionally involved in the art and the science of mind control. And from my perspective, who among us that is of sound mind that would or can deny that politicians, and in this particular case, the US President Donald J. Trump, is not controlling the minds of almost all the people of the world right now, including my mind, I might add, because here I am thinking, I'm taking time out of my life to write and talk about him. Politician number 2 from the said Google search dictionary. And I quote, a politician is a person who acts in a manipulative and devious way, typically to gain advancement within an organization, unquote. The word manipulative, according to this same English dictionary, mean and is defined as, again I quote, manipulative, characterized by unscrupulous, or manipulative mean, and I quote, characterized by unscrupulous control of a situation or person, unquote. Now the word devious, coming from the same definition, the word devious, according to the said dictionary, means and is defined as showing a skillful use of underhanded tactics to achieve goals, unquote. And synonyms for the word devious are devilish, deceitful, dishonest, dishonorable, unethical, unprincipled, immoral, unscrupulous, fraudulent, dubious, and much, much more. All these, I said, you can verify these definitions for yourselves. So again, if my decoding, interpreting, and understanding of this English dictionary's definition of the word politician is at all correct, then one must logically deduce and summarize that a politician is a manipulative, devious, or devilish, deceitful, dishonest, dishonorable, unethical, unprincipled, immoral, unscrupulous, fraudulent, dubious, and much, much more person. Let's verify this again with another dictionary. This time, dictionary number 2. Again, right here online. The beauty about the internet, as I've said in other of my podcast, when defining words and quoting from dictionaries, that with the beauty of the internet, it's so convenient, it's so available. We need not have to go to a library or open a book anymore to find these meanings. Just simply plug in the word in a Google search or some other search engine, and a dictionary will comes up, and you can just quote from it. So these are not my words. So dictionary number 2 is called the Merriam-Webster's or the Merriam-Webster Dictionary. Online. It's online. And according to it, a politician is, and I quote, number 1, a person experienced in the art and science of government, especially one actively engaged in conducting the business of a government. And 2A, a person engaged in party politics as a profession. And 2B, often a politician, often disparaging, a person primarily interested in political office for selfish or other narrow, usually short-sighted reasons, unquote. And this again is from the Merriam-Webster Dictionary online. Dictionary number 3 is from dictionary.com. And I quote from dictionary.com, a politician is, and I quote, a person who is active in party politics. Number 2, a seeker or holder of public office who is more concerned about winning favor or retaining power than about maintaining principles. Check it for yourself. And let's go to 3 from the said dictionary, dictionary.com. A person who holds a political office. Definition number 4, a person skilled in political government and or administration, a statesman or stateswoman. And 5, a politician is an expert in politics or political government. And 6 and final, a politician is a person who seeks to gain power or advancement within an organization in ways that are generally disapproved, unquote. So his job is to govern our minds. Or, as one might say, politicians are here and there to F with and mess with our minds. And by effing or messing with our minds, they cause and create chaos and confusion. And out of the chaos and confusion, they create and get their desired result, which is order, also known as order out of chaos, and to conquer through division. So if we can, or if we will, agree that the United States of America is an imperialist country, a business imperialist corporation. And what do I mean or intend to say by imperialist? Some of you, my listeners, might be asking. Well, the word imperialist is derived from or is related to the word imperialism. Imperialism is defined as, and I quote, a policy of extending a country's power and influence through diplomacy or military force, unquote. And imperialists are those who practice this ideology and philosophy. So again, if we can, or if we will agree that the United States of America is an imperialist country, an imperialist business corporation, and that it takes an imperialist man or an imperialist woman to be the leader of an imperialist country, or that it takes an imperialist man or an imperialist woman to be the president and CEO of an imperialist business corporation, then by logical deduction, we must know that President Donald J. Trump is an imperialist, and that all that he says or does is from an imperialist mindset and with an imperialist goal in mind, which by definition is the continued practice of the country, the United States of America's policy of extending its power and influence through diplomacy or military force, also known as aggression. So for the purpose of this podcast discussion, let us assume that he did make that statement that refers to Africans and other poor countries as shithole countries. The question we must therefore ask ourselves and get answered is this: as an imperialist and the president of an imperialist country that views the world from an imperialist mindset, could he be right? As an imperialist, could he, President Donald J. Trump, be right? Or is it at all possible that he is right? In other words, is it at all possible that as an imperialist, he is right in calling poor countries, and in particularly African countries, shithole countries? But because we do not know the language, we do not know his imperialist Caucasian language, I might add, most people, and in particularly most of us Africans, because of our ignorance of his imperialist Caucasian language, are offended by it. Meaning we are thrown off the ended. We are thrown off the edge. We have no ledge to stand on. We are thrown off the ledge by it, by his comments, by his statement. So to further explain my point, please let us ask the following few questions, and let us seek the answers from both an imperialist mindset and from an imperialist and colonialist subject, citizen or victim's mindset. In other words, let us seek the answers from the two different modes of thinking, the imperialist and the ordinary subjects. Question number 1. What is a shithole? And what is meant by shithole? Question number 2. What is a shithole country? Or what are shithole countries? First, from an ordinary imperialist and colonialist subject, also known as an ordinary subject, citizens or victim, etc., mindset, and his or her natural way of thinking, or if you prefer, from an ordinary native African, Asian, Jamaican, El Salvadorian, etc., that was and is made a subject, a citizen, and a victim of the imperialist and the colonialist acts of colonialism and imperialism. A shithole is a hole that contains shit, also known as filth, waste, stool, feces, crap, excrement, etc. Example, a cesspool or a pit latrine. In our natural, native, earthly human mindset and our natural way of thinking, we did not and we do not think of our homes and the land that we live in and on as shitholes, cesspools, or latrines, etc. And nor do we or would we refer to or treat our human brothers and sisters, or anyone for that matter, as shit, waste, filth, stool, feces, crap, excrement, etc. We are and we were too far evolved, developed, and mature as humans, evolved and developed as the natural native earthly humans, and in particularly as native Africans, to even conceive, let alone entertain such evil thoughts. However, from an imperialist and colonialist mindset, a shithole is a poor, disgusting, and corrupt place that they, the colonialists or the colonists and imperialists themselves, have made poor, have made disgusting and corrupt. And in accordance to and with their expressed ideology, philosophy, and practices of imperialism and colonialism, the countries that they have made shitholes must remain shitholes, meaning they must remain poor, disgusting, and corrupt. And the evidence has shown that such is the job of all imperialist and colonist, of all imperialist countries and colonial countries or empires. The imperialist and colonists know of a fact that before he, the unnatural one, via his malevolent caucasoid ancestors, came on the scene, and before he, the unnatural one, via his malevolent caucasoid ancestors, invaded, captured, divided, conquered, and corrupted the peoples and countries that he now referred to as shitholes and colonies, the natural native earthly humans, or the natural native earthly peoples of those lands, my African ancestors, did not knew of shitholes because they didn't know the alien caucasoid people or speak their alien English language. Secondly, my African ancestors did not know of the idea of shitholes to be meaning a poor, disgusting, and corrupt place, because simply put, they were not living in such a place, and not even knew that such places even existed on the planet. They only knew of it, the idea, as a place to defecate or to dispose of shit, also known as waste. And by the way, just to prove my point, one question that one can ask oneself is this: if these countries were shitholes, or if they were poor, disgusting, and corrupt as these later day imperialists and colonists like Donald J. Trump and others of his peers are suggesting, then why did they, via their malevolent ancestors, invaded and colonized them if they themselves were not interested in shit and in stealing, raping, sodomizing, and robbing shit from our shitholes? Why did they, via their malevolent caucasoid ancestors, invaded and colonized them if they themselves were not far more poor, far more depraved, far more disgusting, and far more corrupt than our countries were? And if they, are shitholes, why are they still colonizing, raping, and exploiting them of their human and natural resources today? If they, the imperialists, are not far more spiritually bankrupt, ethically and morally poorer, and if they are not far more disgusting and corrupt than we are, and than we ever can be. The imperialists and colonists also knew that other word for shithole is colon, or that another word for shithole is colon, from which the words colony, colonial, colonize, and colonialism, etc. are derived. In fact, it is the stem, also known as the root word, for all these words and isms. And what do we know of a fact that is in the colon? And the answer to this question is shit or waste. And what do we know of a fact that is in the countries and lands that the imperialists and colonizers have invaded, colonized, and made into colonies? The answer is that we know of a fact that the native peoples are being robbed of their natural native earthly humanity, and that they are now being treated like shit. And by whom are the natives treated like shit? They are treated like shit by the imperialists and the colonizers, the colonialists, of whom the US President Donald J. Trump represents. So the big question here is this: what does these imperialists and colonialists and colonists, and in this specific case, the imperialist United States of America President, or the US President Donald J. Trump, and his imperialist country, the United States of America, want for us and want to become of us, Africans, and the peoples and countries that he and his peers have verbally and otherwise classified, named, called, or referred to as shitholes. What do they really and truly want for us? Well, from my perspective, and the evidence will show, and the evidence has no doubt shown, is that what he and his imperialist peers, in conjunction with his imperialist corporation, want for us is that we should and that we must remain forever colonized. We must remain forever poor, disgusting, corrupt, and above all, that they should remain forever dependent upon him and his peers, along with his imperialist corporation, the United States, for handouts. We should forever remain dependent on them for handouts, etc. Forever. It's called America First. However, we, the natural native earthly humans, and especially we Africans that were and that are the continuous victims of the vicious, unnatural, and inhuman imperialist and colonialist ideologies, philosophies, and practices, also known as imperialism and colonialism. Though some of us might forget, but most of us do know and understand and overstand who and what we are. And above all, we know of a fact that we were not and that we are not from shitholes. We know, understand, and overstand that shithole was not even a part of our vocabulary. let alone a part of our consciousness. Not at all. We know, understand, and overstand that our homes, our home and motherland, the great continent now called Africa, is not poor. And that it was never poor. We know, understand, and overstand that all of our woes, all our griefs and sufferings and abuse, and all of our challenges, both past, present, and seemingly into the future, are due to colonialism and imperialism, also known as colonization, from both the malevolent Arabs and the malevolent Caucaside. Above all, we know, understand, and overstand of a fact that our home, continent, and motherland, Africa, is not a shithole, and neither are we Africans that are living on the African continent today, living in a shithole. And that we know, understand, and overstand. So in summary and conclusion, is or was the United States President Donald J. Trump right in calling or referring to African countries and other countries that he and others of his peers, his fellow imperialists and colonialists, perceived as being poor shitholes countries? I say yes, because as an imperialist and as a colonialist, with an imperialist and a colonialist mindset and agenda, as I have already defined and explained, that is exactly how he and his fellow imperialists and colonialists see us, view us, and think of us. For thus it is written, can a leopard change its spots? To which I say a resounding no. And thus it is written again, for out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Therefore, for us to expect of the imperialist and the colonialist to see or even treat us as humans is too high an expectation and much too high a requirement for them to live up to, and beyond, and it's beyond their capacity to do. So this is the end of this my podcast presentation and blog post titled, Is US President Donald J. Trump right in calling or referring to African countries and other countries that he and others of his peers perceived as being poor shithole countries? Please stay tuned for another of my soon to be uploaded podcast and blog post. And thanks for watching, listening, or reading. I am the Mystic Philosopher.